Max Kaiser, who was my guest back in 2013 on the show when we had a different studio, he recently said the reason the war exists is because of fiat currencies. And he said the solution is going onto the blockchain. And I haven't gone down that route entirely, but we've seen recently a few examples in Canada, in Ukraine, in Russia with the ruble, where you're seeing for the first time that, man, your financial security and independence and sovereignty is it's closer to being gone than you think it is. And I think I had Dan Held here, or one of the OG Bitcoiners, who said, Brian, freedom of speech is great, and we had a big fight with that in 2020. So I know what it's like to be subject to the whim of governments and companies. 2 years later, they don't seem to care when I say those same things. But Dan said, if you don't have financial freedom, well, you can't even talk about freedom of speech or freedom for elections, because if you're being controlled by your money or lack of money, you don't even get to the speech part. And he has a good point. And I think we're seeing some real world examples of this in the last couple of months that are a little scary.
And there's this tactic being used by governments around the world. They take the extremes of the situations happening today and they create exceptions to rules. They say, well, hey, we should have exceptional legislation. We should have martial law. We should have the ability to repurpose legislation that was previously for terrorism to target domestic dissidents. And I'm not weighing in on whether these people are right and wrong. Often the domestic dissidents are idiots, and I'm not defending their actions. But the ability to repurpose that legislation is incredibly dangerous, because those extremes aren't going to go away. The government in 4 years' time, in 8 years' time, is not going to say, oh, cool, the extreme circumstances have now stopped. The world is marginally more peaceful again. Here is the relenting of all the power that we took. And here are all those laws set back to the defaults. No, that becomes the new norm. And this is this constant edging or attrition of people's rights by the incumbents in power. And so it's an incredibly dangerous thing to see anything other than a hard principle around financial sovereignty, around personal sovereignty, when it comes to these principles. It's why they exist, is so when government does change, when they do have an opposing view, you are protected. And so clearly the solution can't be politics. Clearly it has to be, you can't touch my stuff. You don't even need my permission legislatively or otherwise, because you don't have the keys to my gold under my house.
And what happens when we have a digital, currency, and we're seeing this play out in China versus the US? It starts to get a little more interesting when it comes to, watching you, censoring you, et cetera. How are you seeing that play out, and things we need to learn about both those situations?
So is the question, how are we going to see, could you rephrase the question, Brian?
Is it dangerous to see, China and their digital yuan and some of the ways that they're using that to control a population? Is that something to be alarmed about? And also their actions toward crypto? And is it something we should be now watching to potentially happen in the US or other countries? And is that an argument for, an open, entrepreneur-based stablecoin, for example?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think we're going to see with things like the digital yuan effectively taking all of the conveniences of digital currencies and actually needing all of the benefits, which is self-custody, which is true scarcity. Like, it's essentially going to be run by them at the end of the day. And so it's scary because they have a better form of money that is more effective. It can be traced better. I mean, at the end of the day, it really just comes back to why we actually need to. And I still have huge conviction in Bitcoin at the end of the day, because it's something which everyone believes and everyone trusts in, and that is a more effective store of value than, in my opinion, gold. I'm a huge fan of, I think the Winklevi were laughed at when they said Elon Musk is going to make it rain down gold one day and it's going to be worthless, but it's true. Like, physical scarcity is actually far less potent than digital scarcity. And so we need to switch these new methods of value protection and distribution and storage as soon as possible.
You mentioned Peter Thiel earlier, and I love a bunch of his quotes, and it's a great book, 0 to 1. Competition is for losers, one of his greatest statements. And obviously he was talking about kind of big companies and small companies. Because of Peter, you dropped out of college and were able to pursue your goals. I'm just curious about how that all happened. Was that a great decision you made? Have you met Peter? Have you been inspired by him as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I haven't been able to meet Peter because of COVID. So one day, and obviously, look, he's done controversial things. I don't align with all his beliefs. I actually dropped out before I got the Thiel scholarship. So we made EtherBots and that was profitable, and we kind of built it from there. But I mean, it's an incredible community. The ratio of successes and like value generated per Thiel fellow is absolutely insane. In fact, I don't think there's any, they don't take any stake, but I don't think there's any VC as efficient in terms of like dollars spent per size of company created per entrepreneur in the world. It's absolutely insane. I think there's like 7 unicorns, and they've had like 150 people all selected under the age of 23.
Wow. And that's, you get like a grant, like 100,000 from Thiel Foundation to go pursue your company and drop out of school, and you're saying their ROIs are just off the charts.
Yes. Yeah. And look, I think, hey, it was invented as a joke against it was like the anti-Rhodes Scholarship, saying, well, hey, we should do things a different way. And I think one of his other quotes is, every great lawyer had a brilliant future in their past. And I think this stuff is true, which is, and even if you look at Australia, we're only just starting to do this shift of ambitious students coming out of university saying, hey, I don't have to go and work 100-hour weeks in an IB or a law firm. I can do something that makes me happy. I can build something. I can work in Web3. And so I believe strongly in that vision. I believe strongly in allowing people to refuse traditional paths in favor of just building. And what we've seen in Web3, I think, is the biggest enfranchisement of entrepreneurs ever, as well as creators.
Yeah, it's super powerful, and it will probably take decades to shift, but you're right, we're heading in the right direction. And I went to school with guys, including me, that went on to law careers and investment banks, and we didn't even know why we were doing it sometimes. And I had a bunch of my buddies from MIT, they quit their law firm jobs and got out early. I remember on the way out, the other lawyers used to say, how'd you get out? How'd you get out afterward? Oh, after they left, how'd you get out? And they're like, I just walked out the front door. And they were all trapped in there and waiting for the partnership and stuff. Couple last things, Robbie. You said before that in 5 decades, kids won't spend time in real life. You're not saying that's a good thing, but they're just not going to. I appreciate you saying that the metaverse is going to be such a big part of our kids' future. I got 2 boys, they're 4 and 5 years old, and it's just weird me getting to terms with this, but I know it's going to be the future. Just your thoughts on that, and do we need to prepare ourselves for that? Is that a reason to fight for the open metaverse?
It absolutely is a reason to fight for the open metaverse, because the worlds that they'll grow up in, their form of value will be digital. And so you want them to be able to have the same rights to that as they would to any object in the physical world. That's enshrined by the laws of physics. We're going to ensure this is enshrined by the laws of economic game theoretic incentives. In terms of, is this a good thing and how people live their lives? I think it's very much, can we solve the problems of how to design technology that is good for humans? And I think Web3 is fundamentally a big paradigm shift in favor of that, because it unlocks economic incentives. That means companies succeed when they are pro-consumer. And that is the only thing that matters. It's like in climate change. Nothing matters except economic incentives. The only way we've seen corporate change, even for things like pride or pinkwashing, has been when it is economically advantageous for companies to do that. It is that simple. And I'm not saying there aren't individual or anecdotal instances where people can be compassionate or humane leaders of companies. And we're rewarding that more and more in leaders today, which is awesome. But at scale, companies that are driven by fiduciary responsibilities, that is the only thing that matters. And so we have to make sure economic interests are aligned with human interests across every facet of society. That's what we're doing with the environment more and more. And by pricing negative externalities, which I think NFTs are incredible at, we can do that more efficiently than ever. But it's also really important to do things like time well spent. How are we designing algorithms and the addiction of technology? Like, for instance, I have a thing against any algorithmic newsfeed I refuse to look at, because it is designed to trap your brain by definition. And the human brain is not designed to cope with this stuff. And so we will need to figure out, how can we create systems of technology that empower people as the world becomes increasingly digital? Because I think a virtual future can be an incredibly beautiful future. In fact, we may be in a virtual reality right now, but it's important that that's designed right. It's important it's designed with the right incentives, both in terms of how people spend their time and how people can own their stuff.